You're now listening to the Diversity Roundtable. I'm Pamela Klaba, entrepreneur, inclusion enthusiast, and the founder of Nonkosi Creatives with over 2 decades as a corporate HR professional. My goal is to give you insights into conversations with entrepreneurs and corporate professionals who have insightful stories of triumph and leadership. I uncover my personal journey from cultivating diversity and promoting inclusive communities. We'll also find out why building a prosperous society is vital for leadership roles. Subscribe and get ready to rise, lead, and help define the spirit of South African excellence. Good day. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Pamela Klaba, for the Diversity Roundtable. Today we are on episode 20 and the year is almost over. I am just so humbled and I'm so blessed. But before I introduce our guest for today, let me just talk about what our topic is. So our topic is Voices of Impact, Empowering Change, Leadership and Diversity in South Africa. So you will understand why we chose this topic as soon as I introduced our handsome guest today. So shame, I just put him on the spot. He's feeling very shy. So Monde, stop blushing. So we've got Monde Ndlovu, who is the MD of the Black Management Forum. So thank you, Monde. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. Thank you for coming through. I know that you are very busy, but thank you for taking the time to be with us today. So welcome.
Thank you very much, Siswam.
Yes.
Thank you for the invitation to the round table
Yes.
of diversity.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very
So
much.
a promise that I made to myself and our viewers and our listeners is that I would have you on this podcast before the end of the year. So
All right.
because I think, given the work that you do and the history and the rich history of the Black Management Forum in our country, in South Africa, is so remarkable in terms of the work that has been done in the context of transformation, in the context of management and leadership, being the voice of change and the voice of impact for up-and-coming young professionals, as well as just the professional landscape in our country. So thank you so much and welcome. So I've got a host of questions for you. So I'm not going to put you on the spot, but before we dive in, Monde, into our topic, can you just briefly share with our viewers and our listeners who Monde Ndlovu is, right? So there are people that know you, that know your background, but the reason why we started this podcast, Monde, was to just really inspire young professionals and entrepreneurs, specifically from previously disadvantaged communities or marginalized communities in our country. These young professionals or entrepreneurs, they wouldn't necessarily have an opportunity to sit down with a personality like yourself and have a conversation. So we're hoping that then by recording these discussions, you guys sharing your experiences, your joys, your wins, and how you overcame some of your challenges to get to where you are, will inspire them to show up for themselves, to show up better, and actually then create hope and healing for their future generations in the context of leadership, in the context of diversity and inclusion, as well as management. So please briefly tell us, who is Monde Ndlovu? Over to you. Welcome.
So thank you very much again, Siswam. It's a true pleasure and humbling for me to be here. I think that question of asking who someone is, it's quite a broad question. And usually one of the first ways in which you answer that question is based on the profession or, where I've studied or those type of things. But sometimes when we look at who someone is, I like to deliberately state that I am a product of my family. I'm a product. I come from my parents, and they were intentional about what they did with me, and everything else becomes secondary in terms of who I am.
Yeah.
So I did not just drop out of nowhere. I have a family background. I grew up with parents which is now a privilege because not every black boy, not even a black child, but not every black boy in South Africa, he has the privilege of growing up with both parents in the house. So for me, that's a privilege. I had that privilege of having both my parents, very intentional, very strict parents, at the same time, who were particular about specific things, especially being of service.
Yeah.
And we found ourselves always being forced, which is positive scheming, to be of service to our broader family, etc.
Yeah.
So we grew up with that type of blueprint in us, that we must be of service in whatever we do and find ourselves in. So just briefly, when you ask me who I am, I'm a product of my family, my parents, my community, broader community. I've been part of various communities. I've had the privilege of at some stage I went to a Greek school in primary for 4 years. And at some stage I was doing 4 languages, English, Afrikaans, Zulu, and Greek. And that was a privilege as well. I was part of that community for 4 years. So I moved around different schools. I went to boarding school in KZN. I was a boarder there, different community again. Moved from that boarding school to another boarding school in Johannesburg, Randburg to be specific. Another community there. So I've had a very unique journey in terms of the exposure to different people and the exposure to different communities from then onwards. So I'm a product of that community and those communities as well. Also a product of, there's also church community as well, that also been part of there as well. So the need to be part and parcel of different communities is something I also grew up with. So yes, I'm in Ndlovu, but I must also mix with Ogadebe, Nokaba, and all sorts of people, different people, even white people, even different Caucasians. Like I'm saying, I was with Greeks at some point. What did I learn from the Greeks? And I can tell you briefly some of the things I learned from the Greeks. The Greeks are very communal. And the Greeks are very intentional as well. Greeks are very traditional as well. So there was one festival called Ochi, and the word Ochi means no. It was a time where the Greeks said no to the Turks because they wanted to cross through Greece to go somewhere, but it was a strategic ploy. They actually wanted to go into Greece, and they said no. So the power of saying no, right? So the Greeks taught, and they celebrate that every year. We said no. And those are the Greeks. So there's just this rich history, and I'm just thinking about it now, just being part of so many different communities, learning many different things as well, and certain things that other people would see in me, teachers, they would say those things. And all of us would know that school either made us or broke us in terms of the teachers that we had and what they said. Their words actually built us or they broke us. There was no middle ground. And I experienced that positivity as well. When I got to one of the first boarding school I got to, the rector's wife. She would run the library, so we'd be forced to go get books once a week. Forced to read, and so the rector's wife would run the library. I kid you not. Every week when she spoke to me, she would ask me this one question. She would say, "Monde, when are you going to run the United Nations?" And I was like, me, United Nations.
How long ago was that, and how old were you?
And more recently, actually, I was actually down in KZN for the Inclusive Growth Conference, forum of the Kgalama Motlanthe Foundation. And I went past the school there again just to, pay homage, so to speak, and just remember what took place there. And I remember all of these things.
Yes.
And that was 21 years ago. I left 21 years ago there. But some of those things, being part of different communities, and people affirming things that they see in you that you may not see in yourself as well. People are outside of your family unit. So simply put, though it's a complex question, who are you?
You, yes.
I'm a product of my family and my community.
You know, I think you've answered this in such an unexpected way, because usually when I ask people who are you, they go exactly, what you said earlier in terms of who they are, their job title, what they've done, and this and school and so the way that you've answered it just shows, really how grounded you are as a human being, into who you are and where you come from. And it just reminds me of a journey, as we were talking earlier before we started recording the show, Monde, is that it's very important, because sometimes in life we go through life wearing so many labels, wearing so many titles, that sometimes one doesn't stop and pause and ask this critical question: who am I really? Who am I outside of these titles? What is my identity? What is it that I stand for? So thank you for answering that, because we know that you come from a very influential, a very inspiring family background, right? So let's fast forward, right? Let's fast forward now into your title as the MD of the BMF, right? So the Black Management Forum, to our viewers that don't know what BMF stands for. So can you just maybe explain to our listeners and viewers, what is the BMF and why does it exist, and for how long has it existed? And keeping in mind that the listeners and the viewers of this podcast, the target audience is really the young professionals and up-and-coming entrepreneurs from previously disadvantaged communities.
So the Black Management Forum will answer from back to the first question.
Yeah.
The BMF is almost 50 years old, so it's been in existence now for 48 years. The idea of the BMF is about 50 years old, but putting it together started 48 years ago, 1976. And 1976, as we know, is a very unique year in South Africa, with the Soweto uprising, the stay away, because people tend to forget that's where it almost started, to stay away. Even those ideas came from other revolutionaries like Yotsetsi Mashinini, the what's his name again? He died of a petrol bomb. I remember his name just now. When they expounded on these ideas to young people and young minds about the economy, etc. When you listen to videos of Tsietsi Mashinini at the tender age of a teenager explaining the economy at that age, and talking about the power of the stay away and etc. Because the parents were being pushed by the young people, said no, don't go to work. Right, don't go to work. And then it evolved into them students protesting. But I'm just mentioning those elements. And then in the same year, you have the Black Management Forum also emerging. Also young people, but older, right? So young professionals, but a bit older. The founder of the BMF, the founding president of the BMF, Mr. Eric Mafuna, he's still alive today. He'll be 80 next year. So he was the founding president at the age of 31. Now, what made the BMF come into existence is a very key question. And in context, the 70s, in terms of resistance to the system, the cadence of resisting in the workplace specifically started in KZN, when the workers who take refuse bags, etc., they started to protest. So protesting in the workplace to put down the tools, that cadence actually started in KZN.
Yeah.
And also the growing need of having unions, etc. So you start to see that movement of starting to protest now directly in the workplace, which is something that was not really done. And at the same time, now you have black professionals, very few in the space, but wanting to create a home, so to speak, for black professionals, and wanting to support each other in the workplace, a very difficult place to be in. So those are the seeds, and of course the black consciousness drive as well of the 70s.
Yeah.
So all of these things, black is beautiful, black people can do it, black this and black that in the 70s, underground black movements, and black people also being in corporate as well, up to a certain point. Also the Sullivan Code from the United States, which was developed by Reverend Sullivan around, in fact, it was a forerunner to affirmative action in South Africa. So it developed in order to put pressure on multinational companies in South Africa who are US based, right, to drive diversity, right, to drive that.
Yes.
So that's the forerunner.
Yeah.
And that is why we begin to see
black
people like your Eric Mafunas, your Dr. Roel Kozas, etc., Lot Ndlovus, and others working in multinational companies.
Yes.
That's the reason why, because of the Sullivan Code. You see, so that's also very rich history there of them getting into that. Some of them worked at Shell, Unilever, KZN, was absorbing them because of the Sullivan Code as well. So the impact of that in the workplace was beginning to be seen, where black people were starting to move into those companies. And not necessarily in South African-based companies at the time. So it's a very interesting juxtapositioning of the role of black people starting to get into corporates, but they were multinationals, not necessarily ones that were here. So that's the broad context of how BMF came into existence. When it then started, just like the security branch, the last dying kicks of apartheid were very vicious. That when they would hear that there is a organization that will start, they would tail it until they find out what exactly is going on. So it happened with BMF as well. That the original manuscripts of BMF, when it started then, they disappeared because they were being tailed to the T. They heard that there's a new black organization that's starting. And they wanted to know what it is. So they were tailed till the end. So that was the other thing that happened. We also had some of our members being locked up, either in prison, even dying as well. They were having a meeting one time, and some of them had taken time. And there was a shootout, and one of them was killed. And the meeting stopped. When they tell the stories, we just stopped talking what we were talking about. So, hey, this is becoming very serious. So that's the broader context of the growing pains of it. But at the heart of it, why it started because we wanted to create a space, a home for black professionals. Then how that home evolves, we'll get into that. But those are the seeds that were planted, part of the movement of black thinking in the 70s, the resistance that started in the workplace, which shone a spotlight as to how black people are being treated in the workplace. How do we support them? How do we create something that will outlive all of us? That was something else. And so I'll get into the different phases
Yes.
of the evolution of the organization?
No, because that is exactly going to be my next question. And thank you for that background and for that context. Because as you're talking, listening attentive, like as if you read my mind. Because I was going to say, okay, you know what? This started in 1976, right? And now we are in 2024, right? So obviously, there's been a lot that has been happening over the years, right? And, so my question then is, which leads to exactly what you've said in terms of the evolution of BMF. And, so what is the core mission, or one of the core missions of the BMF in the context of where we are in 2024, and how has that evolved?
Yeah.
Then over time, maybe just take us through the journey so that it's relatable to a young professional who's listening. So, I've never heard of a BMF, or maybe I've heard, but maybe I've never paid attention. But can you just give them context then in terms of the core mission and how it has evolved over the years, considering where we are in our country today?
Yeah. So let's backtrack a bit. So the core mandate of the organization is to develop managerial leadership, or what we call managerial leadership, and also drive socioeconomic transformation in the country. We stand for the empowerment of managerial leadership in the country, and for the creation of managerial processes and systems and values that reflect the broader society. So that's briefly in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Why managerial leadership, or why that specific coining of managerial leadership? So we stand for that because we want to see individuals who have both a management understanding and a leadership understanding. So you're not just a manager, neither you just a leader, but you are a manager and a leader. Right? So why management? Why management? Because it's important for Black people in their upward mobility to understand structures, systems, authority, profit and loss, running profit and loss, making decisions, and having that authority from management, understanding management throughout its different spheres. And then leadership, there's no authority, right, or legitimate authority, or power given by, right. So leadership is coming in to say how are you dealing with people, not with systems and structures, but how are you dealing with people? How are you taking people along? What is the vision? How are you developing people? So we stand for those two very powerful spheres. That Black people must manage the economy. And management is the heartbeat of the economy. Right? Not just ownership. So we've gotten to a place where we feel, yes, Black people must own the economy. Yes, that's true. It must happen. But who's managing it? So now you've got, and that's something we need to really wrap our minds with today going to the future. It's not either or. It's not Black people are just managers. And you've seen this with debates out there that I don't want a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 5. Where will you learn certain competencies if you don't have an 8 to 5? Yes, you may. I'm not saying it's completely impossible if you just run your own business, but there is specific things that we learn by getting into management and into those spaces. And
definitely.
And we must not undermine. And that's the other thing that's starting to happen. It's almost like management is being undermined. It's almost like an easy way out of starting your own business. So no. Actually, management runs the economy. Ownership gives the vision, because you own something. You don't have to necessarily be part of it if you own it. So we really got to wrap our minds around these things, is that ownership gives us a voice. Ownership gives us power.
Yeah.
Management is the one that drives that vision. So now, if black people are only owners,
Yeah.
and they don't have the management know-how, then we're still not being controlled. So we need both spheres.
Yeah.
We've got to get into that. So that's the challenge. And if you go back into the history, 70s, 80s, very few black managers. Even the word manager for a black person, you are not allowed to call a black person a manager, right? At all. At all. Right? So
We have come a long way.
So we've come a long way.
Yeah.
Especially with the development of legislation, etc. A long way. But they were not allowed to be called managers. In fact, a lot of them were tokens. There were token blacks at the time. And I'll tell you a story. Look, I've got lots of stories, but
Please tell me this one.
I'll tell you the story.
Yes.
So Dr. Blade Nzimande.
Yeah.
Dr. Blade Nzimande, in his thesis,
Yeah.
there's a phrase there called corporate gorillas.
Uh-huh.
That phrase, corporate gorillas, was actually made popular in the BMF by the late Donham Kwanas.
Uh-huh.
And Dr. Blade Nzimande, he at that time, before he did his PhD,
Yeah.
he felt, you know what, I want to try get into corporate.
Yeah.
I want to see if I can get it. And he tells the story as
Yeah.
well. And when he tried to do that, he asked himself, how are these guys surviving this environment? And then he felt, you know what? Let me rather go be an academic. And he said this on platforms. And he's also written about, it's part of his thesis, the corporate gorillas, as well, analyzing some of those things. So that environment was extremely hostile. There's just too many stories there about how blacks were treated in management.
Yeah.
And also how they needed to be the in-betweener between the owners of capital of the company
Yeah.
and the workers.
Yeah.
The workers used to see them as traitors. And then the owners would see black management as tokens. And Benfan Tolike, right? From Afrikaans. They would speak Afrikaans to management. Then management must interpret that to the workers. And if the workers are talking a specific language, it was the same thing. So that being sandwiched in between. This side, your people think you are a traitor. At some point, the ANC thought, the mass democratic movement and their theorizing of things, they placed capital and the economy at that time as the big problem. And when BMF came about and the ANC in exile heard that there's a group of young black intellectuals who work in corporate. And when they went and on an offensive, because there was a change of strategy. I'm jumping around here.
No, I'm actually enjoying.
There's a change of strategy
Yeah.
in the late from 86.
Yeah.
Let me do this. From 76 to 86.
Yeah.
The focus was come together. Let's build a home, right, for black professionals. Let's also see how we can develop each other.
Yes.
Let's dialogue amongst each other.
Yes.
Right. That was the focus.
Yeah.
Between maybe 4 years, 5 years later, they developed a paper around mentorship, the need for mentorship, etc.
Yeah.
So those things were developing. When the state of emergency came through, it changed different things. Number one. Number two, there's two specific members that joined BMF who shook it up, right? Because BMF didn't do advocacy.
Yeah.
There was no advocacy at that time in the first 10 years.
Yeah.
Now, from 86, you have these two individuals. I'll tell you who it was. It was Part1 Kwanazi and Lot Ndlovu.
Yeah.
So when they came into the BMF, they started to say, but you saying the BMF, you want to develop managers, etc. But and then you're gonna say you are not apolitical, right? But your very creation is political because you are a creation of your socio-economic environment. So now there's a problem with the environment. Now we have to deal with the environment as well. Otherwise, this black talent will not flourish. Big debate in the BMF in the late 80s. So that was part of the offensive. So they came into top leadership, president, deputy president, and they went on an offensive to say we're going to explain ourselves now. Including the ANC, PAC, the political parties on one side, churches on the other side. They had a big strategy and called for a new economic order of thinking around, what we want as black people. So BMF's voice and NAFCOC as well. And NAFCOC is the oldest black professional body. And they were coming from purely the entrepreneurship perspective because they had set up that organization to assist and develop black entrepreneurs in the townships. And so they were coming from that perspective. Then BMF was coming from the management and leadership side. So there's these two big voices in the I would say in the black leadership space in the late 80s. One was talking black economic empowerment, which was BMF, and NAFCOC had their own view. I think it was called their document economic I forgot, economic something 1 2 3 4 5. But they had that, but they were pushing the line, both of them, in saying, look, we political freedom is not sufficient. So then BMF went into exile to where the ANC was, engaged them, or the late Tinto Mboweni was in the economic desk of the ANC, etc. So they met them. One of the questions that the ANC top leadership asked the BMF was this one that I'm saying, that how you guys are working in the system. So they had to explain themselves. To say no. As much as we work in the system, right? As much as we put on corporate cloaks, our identity is this. And as a result, because of that, BMF was highly respected, by the government in waiting, which was the ANC, leading into 1994, and that marked one of the decades of massive progress, not just for the BMF, but for the country, because the role that BMF played in focusing government, especially on economic transformation, employment equity, specifically as well, that and affirmative action and driving that, and some people felt BMF is antagonistic, unrelenting. They were really when BMF got to a platform, they did not hold back on articulating very clearly what needs to happen when it comes to transforming management spaces, and also the philosophy behind that, which is Africanizing management in the country. Of course, we're not there even today in 2024. So that is the mandate. We want to see black people managing the economy and having continuous upward mobility, and most importantly, sustaining that, and which we called critical mass. Because when you look at the numbers today, for some reason, just because we're the majority, we assume that the numbers going into corporate will always remain the same. But when you look at what's happening in the education system, we might even see less black people coming into the system as a result of what's going on in the education system today. So we are seeing, numbers going in at entry level, etc. And there's been some transformation there, but from middle management going up, not as much as lower levels. But we need to be careful. My argument is we need to be very careful as to what's going on in the education system today. Is it sufficiently preparing young people for the workplace? And some of the stats are telling us that only 4 out of 10 would be almost fit for the workplace. That's dangerous. Those are dangerous numbers. So that should be a big worry. I mean, only 3.5% of Africans have got degrees. That's undergrad all the way to doctorate. In relation to the population, those who've got diplomas and other TVET, it's about 6% or so. So the numbers are quite low for a country that wants to develop or is a developing country going forward. So in a nutshell, we want to change the environment, socio-economic transformation, which includes policy, advocating for that change, articulating what needs to happen, lobbying hard for it. And on the other side, making sure we develop the leaders that we need, the managers we need to hold this economy and run it. That's the key, and run it.
We've got a big work and a big job ahead of you, Monde, but it takes a community, right? So it really takes a community. So just out of curiosity, and this question I get a lot, and because the name Black Management Forum is very descriptive, right? So in 2024, right, in the context of diversity and inclusion, right, and you know where I'm going with this. So some of the questions that we get in informal discussions is, so the BMF only caters for Black professionals, and how do you define Black professionals? And what about, professionals that are not Black? What about white professionals? So I understand the history and where it comes from, but in the context of where we are in 2024 in diversity and inclusion, can you talk to us about that? So if someone asks you that question, how would you answer it?
Yep. So it's a good question. So I just remembered another story now. In the early 90s, before democracy, the same thing was happening. Why do you still call yourselves Black? Why don't you call it the South African Management Forum? Why must you retain the word Black? So, and of course, I mean, we've been in tune with the changes and the principles of democracy. BMF is non-racial, right? It's non-sexist. So we maintain those principles. The difference is that when we analyze the challenges that we face in the economy, in the education system, in society, the face of poverty, unemployment, and inequality
is Black.
So now we need to deal with those matters because they are the majority. We are the majority. But we are an economic minority. So when you analyze those facts, then it answers itself that it is relevant to still be radical and say Black Management Forum. Secondly, we have had white members in the BMF. Even in the 80s, they were members who were white, were white in the organization. I recently met one who was one of the first white members of the BMF in the 80s. Okay, I won't tell you where she works. I'm not sure.
No, don't tell us, please.
I was pleasantly surprised. No, Monde, I know you. I know BMF. Let me tell you. And then she broke it down for me. Like, wow. This is a white person. Who believed and still believes in what the BMF stands for. Now, in standing for Black people doesn't mean you stand against white people.
Thank you for answering that question. Thank you for answering it in that way, right? Thank you. Because just to, if I can just come in there, that if you, because I've been on platforms recently, at least this year, most of this year, where I was just talking about pro-Black initiatives, right? And I remember answering a friend of mine who is not Black to say, listen, the fact that I stand for Blackness and Black, it doesn't mean that I'm anti-white, right? So the reason why I do it is because I myself grew up in a rural place, in a highly marginalized place. So I know the struggles. So for me, it's not because I am standing for blackness because I'm black, it's because I know, the lack of access, the lack of, to access to certain resources that other people have that we do not have. And still today, that our people do not have. So me standing for blackness does not mean that I'm anti-white. We had quite a long discussion about this, and I really enjoyed the discussion. So thank you for answering it in that way. Because then who is going to stand up for us if not ourselves?
So the process of transformation has got different layers to it.
Yeah.
So Steve Biko also did say that black people also need to learn to live in a non-racial society as well. As much as white people must unlearn certain things, black people will also need to unlearn and learn certain things.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not sure how many people understood what he truly meant. That's why we're still trying to unpack even what Biko said.
Yeah.
So being pro-black must not be misconstrued as meaning that we are removing whites, right? That's not what it means at all, and that's not where BMF has come from, right? So we work together. We're building a non-racial society together, and we want to have sustainable race relations.
Yes,
right? Which is contextual.
Yeah,
so we've got to be contextual.
Yeah.
So, argument's sake, let's remove all of the political jargon, so to speak.
Yeah.
Let's look at the Sustainable Development Goals. The first Sustainable Development Goal says leave no one behind. Basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Now you take that Sustainable Development Goal, you apply it to South Africa. On what basis should people not be left behind? Of course, there's other 16 Sustainable Development Goals that talks to poverty, hunger, etc.
Yeah.
And then you start to analyze it on that basis. You're going to want to know who is being left behind and based on what. Mm-hmm. So you look at socially who's being left behind, or who is ahead, and who's being left behind. And economically, you do the same thing. Even within the economic spaces, you look at even healthcare, who's being left behind. I mean, you apply that everywhere, and you'll get to a similar conclusion that the people who are being left behind in their majority are black people and Africans in particular. And so saying that is not being anti. No, you want to correct society. That's what we want to do. You want to correct society. Most importantly, you want to unleash society.
Yeah.
You want to unleash everyone's potential in society so that the country can benefit. And that's where diversity is now coming in. Because if you're only going to have a one-track mind and having people who are assimilated in that one-track mind of thinking, of thought, which is not diverse, then what suffers is the business, and then the community, then eventually the economy will suffer as well. So diversity is critical, and hence it's not just the race thing, it's also the gender thing as well, and other groups who are excluded, and other ideas which are excluded, and other processes which are excluded. So bringing in that is quite key, even amongst Africans. Just because we're African doesn't mean we agree. There's a diversity of views again. So you can bring Africans who are Africans into the space, and bring coloureds who are into the space, etc. Bring them into the space, but it doesn't mean that even them together alone, they're gonna think the same. No, they remain diverse even within that space. So diversity is very deep. That even from a race point of view, you've not completed the process of diversifying your team, diversifying the organization, diversifying the economy of society, just by bringing a particular race. That's the starting point. And how do you bring them in? Affirmative action brings them in because it forces that. Once they are here, then you deal with diversity.
Yes.
Right? There's diversity of skill now as well. Diversity of ideas. There's diverse personalities.
Yeah.
So as a leader now, you've got to really think more holistic about the kind of people that you've brought into an organization, maybe forced by legislation, which is good. It must happen because it's not an organic process. In South Africa, transformation is an inorganic process. But in theory,
even in 2024,
it's an inorganic process. But in theory, it is organic because without transforming something, it dies. In theory.